Thank you all for being here. Let's start. John, you want to start off?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Downing. John is fine. I am a video game attorney, working at a small firm in San Francisco, formerly at EA, and first MAG event. So hello.
Hey, I'm Riley McDonald, also a video game attorney. I spent 2 years working at Capcom before pivoting into the mobile game industry, so now I'm at a mobile game video company. So.
I'm Joe Newman. I've been coming to MAG events and doing legal panels for quite a while now. I worked first actually with John at EA, then I was at Ubisoft, then I was in private practice. So working basically doing kids privacy and consumer protection stuff and intellectual property. Yeah, I guess you want to say what that is.
I guess my primary focus is like copyright is kind of my bread and butter, but also a little bit of trademark and dabbling in like AI stuff as well these days. So.
I've historically done a lot of copyright, did esports when I was at Capcom. Now I do a lot of privacy, consumer protection, including advertising law, make sure everything's compliant.
And yeah, now I'm at a startup. What? Hold on, just give me 1 second. So we can get Sam in. How's everyone's MAG going? So okay, while I'm again trying to get Sam loaded up here, Sam is another video game attorney. Why don't we start with a little bit of how did you get to be a video game lawyer? What was the thought process behind it, as well as how did you actually make it happen? Actually, before we even go into that question, how many attorneys are here in the audience? Cool. We got any law students or people who are thinking about going into law? That's really cool.
How many gamers in the audience?
Okay. Cool. Yeah. How many people here work for a game studio or make games? Nice. Are you looking for free legal advice?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. No, exactly. So we'll give the standard legal disclaimer, which is that while we are here in our own individual capacities, we are not your lawyers, we're not here to give legal advice, we're not speaking on behalf of our companies. And if you do need legal advice, talk to us. Talk to us after the panel, maybe we can hook you up. Yeah, that's the standard legal disclaimer. So take it away, John. How did you get into this?
Dumb luck, primarily. I got in EA, working in the legal department there before I was an attorney, working in a sort of a paralegal-esque role called legal approvals, where we were sort of the first gateway for game teams when they were publishing games or publishing promotional materials to review and process those. And in having a conversation with one of the attorneys there who'd been there for a while, I was told, there's kind of a definite cap to what you can do in video game law without a law degree. So I was like, well, that tells me what I need to do then. So I went to law school while I was working there, and here I am now.
A little bit of luck with a series of events that led me to where I am. During law school, first summer job was at the Federal Trade Commission, working in the Consumer Protection Division, which has a lot of overlap with things that an in-house video game attorney needs to do. And then after that, while in law school, I spent a year at a primarily patent boutique law firm working on video game matters, but also dabbled in some copyright and trademark also on video game matters. And then straight out of law school, went to Capcom, and now I am at the mobile game company.
Awesome. So we have a couple of things that we prepared to talk about, but I am curious, just show of hand, like, are there specific legal issues in the games industry that you were wanting to talk about? Feel free to just raise your hand and shout them out. Yeah.
I guess infringing on trademark, particularly if you were making an educational game and you wanted to be able to reference things, this is just purely hypothetical.
Just purely hypothetical.
Yeah. Not a specific question, yeah.
But I mean, like, the world of incorporating real life things into your game that are existing products or trademarks in some way that's either not infringing or just the world of that. How you
Okay.
go about it.
All right. I'm going to make a note. We're going to talk about trademark Rogers test. We'll do that. All right. I'm not going to jump straight into the Q&A because what else? Any other questions, burning topics, things that you want to talk about? No, let's go. I'm just
We're
gonna
making a
do-
list.
Yeah, we're making a list.
I wanted to see if y'all would talk about, like, say Nintendo attacking a lot of people's fan creations and whatnot, versus maybe like a team like Sonic Team and Sega who kind of lives here. And if you think like Nintendo is valid on their attacks, or is this they're kind of getting
Great. Fan works. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to pin Sam so we can get his intro here as well. Can you hear me, Sam? Okay. Is it coming through there? Should I try connecting, disconnecting the HDMI?
You promise there's supposed to be a fourth attorney on that screen.
Yes, there's a person on this one.
Maybe it's his face.
Yeah, there's Sam. Hey, everybody say hi, Sam. Hello. Hi, Sam. Hey. Yeah, no, you're not going to be able to see it. Actually, I could. No, you're just going to. Do we have this on the screen?
I can't hear him.
We need some duct tape and a squirrel. We can get this to work.
No, it's all good. It's all good. All right.
This one might one for you, one for
So we figure it out. Okay. Other topics. Again, while we are.
You can scoot the mics down.
Yeah, that's true.
That's good.
Okay, sure. Let's do that. Okay. Any other topics? Yes. Got it. So CIPRA and privacy, particularly in mobile games. Oh, dang. All right. All right. Okay. I will use their special credits. Okay. Cool. So CIPRA, privacy and mobile games. Sure.
Can you tell me about having gameplay systems, just mechanics in
I can't imagine why that question might be relevant right now.
Yeah. So anyone from Pal World here?
Where's Nintendo?
Although that's kind of more between. Hey, cool. Sam, can you can almost hear you. Alright. Well, alright, if you speak very loudly, you want to give a quick intro?
Sure, alright, let's go ahead. Now, my name is Sam Castry. I have my own law firm out in the Chicago area, and a lot of video game companies, like studios out here. And I do a lot of intellectual property and business law and tourist stuff as it comes up. And everything here. I hope you can all hear me.
Yeah. Cool. Alright, can we hear him? Woo! Okay, alright, we'll keep working on it. Thank you, Sam. Alright, cool. So how about we start, do we want to start with the trademark issue?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to kick it off?
Sure. So the question was like using trademarks in sort of an educational purpose. So yeah, there's you mentioned like the Rogers test, and that's kind of one way we would approach that, I suppose. There's this test in trademark law called the Rogers test, which is basically asking if if a registered mark is being used in some sort of artistic way, and if it's used in an artistic manner, then you can reference the trademark at by referencing the work itself. So you could say, this is famously referencing a movie that was talking about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And Ginger Rogers' name was being thrown around and she was not happy about it. But the name of the movie, the movie the case was talking about was called Fred and Ginger. And it was about a couple of vaudevillian actors who were basing their act on Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And ultimately the court determined that because the names were being used in an artistic way, that it was being relevant to the work, that it was not infringing on the trademark. And that's sort of one of the ways that trademark is looked at in that regard. If you're referring to the trademark as its mark and not like not misrepresenting where your work is coming from, like you're not saying that this is you know, sponsored by this trademark brand or something like that, then it may be okay if it is artistically relevant otherwise. So that's kind of one way it's looked at. There's also nominative fair use is something in trademark law, where if you are referring to a mark by the product, usually in a way of commenting on it or some sort of comparisons or criticizing it even, that can be a way to reference a work that is trademarked. So that's one way.
I think that's a really succinct summary. That was good.
Joe, anything else?
Did you cover the Jack Daniels commercial?
I did not cover Jack.
Oh yeah, so there's a wrinkle to this in the world of trademark law. It's actually fairly recent. So it was a group of people making dog toys, and they wanted for some reason to poke fun at Jack Daniels whiskey. And so do you remember it was like something?
It was a Jack Daniels bottle like chew toy is what the
it was
product
like it was a chew toy, but it had the same chew. It's okay. Not a pop quiz.
That like Jack Russell or something?
Yeah, or like
Jack Russell
Cocker Spaniels or something like that. But bad Spaniels. Thank you, Sam. Yeah. So and they apparently pissed off the Jack Daniels people enough that they went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually kind of went in a different direction. They said, yeah, the Rogers test still kind of is good law, but if you're using it specifically as a like brand identifier, as a like way of naming your product, that's actually not okay. And in so doing, I mean, it's a very interesting case because it kind of undid a lot of like, what does it now mean to be used as a brand identifier? Is it a brand identifier for your entire product, or just using it to talk about the brand in the context of your thing? Sam, I know you were following the case. Do you want to hop in on that?
Well, yeah, a little bit. I think part of the is just kind of off topic a little bit, but since I believe comic books, creative works, like something on trademarks, on trademark office policy. So you have something like Fred Jr. That's got a trademark on his books. He's got a series. So I kind of want to have that for all things. I thought it was interesting that we have a like that. I was referencing something on the but then it's like contrast that with the product line. And it's not like there was any sort of realization that they have something as a
So don't name your game Monica.
Right, yeah.
See, I might need to repeat a lot of that. I don't know about you guys. I couldn't really hear. You guys in the same boat?
Could you not hear it all? Okay.
Sam, do we have you? Yeah. We should be having you on Sam's track.
We're working through day one tech difficulties for the
Here I
rest
am talking to you all. Yay!
All right, Sam, repeat everything you just
Yeah,
said.
repeat everything you said, sorry.
Okay, great. Sure. Okay, so I think it comes down to a lot of the artistic merit issue, and one thing, little kind of off-topic kind of issue, is that single titles of creative works, like movies, like books, like band albums, are not considered trademarks. Exceptions being video games and coloring books for reasons that no one quite knows and are not relevant to the current discussion. But otherwise, single creative works aren't trademarks. So Fred and Ginger unless there was a whole series of those movies, isn't a trademark in the first place. And I wonder whether that matters at all. Kind of a side issue. But for the Bad Spaniels case specifically, there wasn't really any sort of artistic merit in making your dog toy look like a Jack Daniels bottle. There wasn't really any sort of social commentary. It was just kind of a silly wordplay, sight gag kind of thing. And I think that also comes in with there was a copyright case recently also that kind of had a similar vibe to it along those same lines. So I think if you can, so I think the ground rules kind of going forward are, if you can point. Okay, good. I can't see anything. I don't know what you're doing. So I think if you can make a serious, actual, real, legitimate argument that this is relevant to the artistic, creative side of things, or some sort of real, serious social commentary or whatnot, you're probably going to be okay. But if it's just a silly joke, not so much. That's going to be a much harder sell compared to real artistic commentary and such.
Yeah, one of the keys is are you actually commenting on the work, or are you using that work to comment on something else?
This is the classic parody versus satire dichotomy. It comes up in fair use like all the time. A lot of people like to call things parodies that are not actually parodies. A parody has to eat your own. Has to take something and comment or criticize on the thing that it's borrowing from, whereas a satire is borrowing something and commenting or criticizing something else. So, yeah.
Cool. Sam, can you now see some of the MAG audience?
I'm looking at your background.
Oh, all right. Sorry. let me turn that on.
Good call.
There you go. How's that?
Hey, everybody.
There you go. All right. Thank you for bearing with us. Anything we else want to say on trademarks, or should we keep going?
Do you have any other specific questions about it, or
Not specific.
not specific questions? Questions generally.
I will say also, I mean, again, not your lawyer, not giving, but I think that one of the key things in the Warhol case was, is there an educational purpose? Is that there's a tension in trademark law. We want to let people, own their works and they have exclusive rights to them and not get kind of ripped off. But the use of a trademark in an expressive way, particularly if you are talking again about the thing that is trademarked, we don't want, the free speech sort of expression concerns with using trademark as a way of stopping people from criticizing.
We got a follow-up over here?
Yeah, trademarks. We're working on a website that does a lot of fan music for basically distributes fan music for video game music and break.
Sure.
Most of the video game companies don't go on the website because either they enjoy the notoriety of that, and we kind of consider ourselves
Okay, so that was a perfect segue actually to the next topic, which is fanworks. The question was about, hey, we do covers of music, we do covers, we do fanworks of existing video game or other things, very relevant to the people who are here. What are sort of the defenses if we were to get in trouble with a copyright? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I can start us off with I think the biggest defense out there normally is fair use in that regard. I think you can claim that you are taking and borrowing this for a fair use, usually some sort of transformative way. You are creating something new with a permitted taking in that regard. And fair use is a very fact-intensive analysis. There's 4 factors that would have to be examined for it every time. Try to remember off the top of my head.
I already pulled them up preemptively.
Thank you. I'll be saying purpose and character. Purpose and character, the amount taken, effect on the market, and affecting the market.
Nature of the work.
Nature of the copyright.
Nature of the copyright. Yes.
Well, yeah, hold on. It's going to be a pause for that.
We got 3 out of 4.
That's still passing grade.
It'll work in court. Don't worry.
Riley, how have you sort of seen this play out in your practice?
I think video game publishers have more rights than they often implement when it comes to fan works, because there is this kind of mutually beneficial relationship that they do have with fans, where realistically in most situations what the fans are doing isn't actually hurting their business, rather it's actually helping their business. It's creating a community, it's maybe bringing more eyes to the game that results in more purchases. So typically, in my experience, just from what I've seen, there are definitely some more aggressive companies out there that we've mentioned earlier. But unless you're doing something that's just incredibly distasteful with the work, a lot of them will leave you alone if it is mutually beneficial or just even beneficial in any type of situation. But if you're doing anything, say, like very risque or something that's kind of like morally against what the company wants their brand to represent, then they might step in and start exercising those rights.
If I can just kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, I think that like one of the analyses that a company will take when deciding whether or not to enforce their IP is going to be like, there's a PR element to this, like oftentimes. Like it doesn't look great going after fan creators a lot of times, or you know, like it feels like punching down a lot of times. So like Riley's saying, like unless it's something that is really kind of a grotesque use in some ways, a lot of times they will let things slide. But it's not to say they always will.
Yeah, it becomes a question of how big are you, and, you know, when you get to the levels of, say, you know, how well? Okay. Right. Yeah.
I think that's another relevant issue, though. You know, like the size and the market impact, which is one of those market impact, one of those fair use factors anyway. But I think a lot of companies are perfectly content to let people raw fan art, look the other way when there's a music cover happening that's not all that big or getting notoriety or selling a whole lot of albums or anything. Fan games, you know, I'll always say don't make a fan game. Make your own characters, it's better for you anyway. But you know, there are projects out there that even the more hardcore companies are not going to mess with. You know, like Pokemon Uranium, for example. A fan game, taking a bunch of Pokemon stuff, using the Pokemon name. The only real problem was when they started getting really big and lots of press. I don't know whether they were selling it or not. That's certainly a big no-no. But until it got to that point where some sort of threshold that this is just it's too big now, most companies are just going to let that slide. Look for the PR issue a lot of times. You know, if there's people making fan, I'm drawing Mario because he's my favorite character and I have every Mario game ever. You don't want to mess with that, dude. You didn't make him hate you all of a sudden, you know, without a really good reason. But if it's, I'm doing Metroid 2, the game you're making a remake of yourself, that's a much bigger issue. And to be fair, you know, the Metroid 2 remake, people didn't know that Nintendo had a remake in the works, but they always might. So I want to really stress that, you know, be really careful. Don't do fan games in general. If you're going to, don't go public with them. That you're just inviting trouble at that point.
Yeah, I think everyone who works in the fan community is passionate, and no, you know, lawyer wants to squash that passion. But it's a question of how big is it? Is it making money? You know, are you trying to turn that fan appreciation and love into something that is actually benefiting you in a real way? That's when they go after their career, essentially. Okay, I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to talk about the question that was raised around privacy, because I'm particularly, this is my world and my space, and I, you know, mobile games, kids' privacy, you know, consumer privacy. That's a thing that I think a lot of people are really focused on. And so I'm kind of curious, I always ask this question, who here has read a privacy policy? Yes. Wow. Who has read a privacy policy recently? Yeah? What did you think of it? Did you understand it? Okay, so the So what they said is they looked at the California rights section and they opted out of the sale data. So that since we are in California, so a couple years ago they passed the California Privacy Rights Act. Before that it was the CPPA, CCPA, excuse me, thank you. California Consumer Privacy Act. And what this does, if you're a California resident or if you're a business that is doing business in California, if the law applies to you, which most California big companies it does, they have to put certain disclosures in there about exactly what data is going to get collected, who it gets shared with, and what it's used for. And beyond that, you have the right to opt out of the quote-unquote sale of your personal information. And so one of the things that's very important about knowing that that right exists is it is an opt-out regime. Unlike other countries where it's an opt-in regime, you actually have to go and exercise that right. And a lot of ink has been spilled in the past couple of years about how do we make that right easier to access and exercise, including through things like browser controls and signals. Has anyone here heard of the global privacy control? Yeah, okay, so the people who read privacy policies. But take a look at it, because that is actually a right that you have as a California resident to set that signal. It's a device level signal, or it can be a browser level signal. And that actually, California businesses up to the law have to respect it. So it's a lot easier than like going through and finding particular rights. That's my little shout out as a privacy. Oh yeah. It would take an act of Congress, sure, maybe, or an act. I mean, the California legislature, all the state legislators are passing laws right now. I think there are the last time I checked, there was over 40 different laws, and there are only 50 states. So many states have multiple laws just on consumer privacy issues. I track all of them. This giant spreadsheet. It's not fun. There's what is interesting is that there has not been a federal privacy law. There's been multiple bills. There have been attempts for probably over a decade to have a federal privacy standard that would harmonize all of these different state law requirements. But it's just really hard to get that passed. And it's really hard because a lot of people justifiably don't know what it means to sell data. What does it mean? If I'm giving data to you because I'm trying to do targeted advertising, yeah, that's probably, maybe, I don't know. So defining it, I'm dating myself, but there used to be a thing called Do Not Track. There were literally like at least 13 to 14 meetings just dedicated to how are we defining the word track. Because it's actually, when you get into the weeds, it becomes a lot more difficult. Was there a follow-up question? Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I think so.
Yeah. So the point was that under the CPRA, which amended the CCPA, they kind of closed the loophole as to what a sale was. A lot of companies were saying, oh, well, if there's no money changing hands, if I'm just like doing a co-op and I give you some data and you give me some data, and we all pool our data together, blah, blah, blah. And there were a lot of kind of creative lawyery ways to try and make it sound like you weren't doing a sale. The CPRA closed a lot of those loopholes, which is good. Before we any other comments on privacy or just operationalizing it?
Nothing on mine.
I guess from your guys' perspective, a kind of cool thing if you want to quickly have that global privacy control and has the side effect of also just being an ad block that tends to work really well if you're trying to switch away from Google and just everything there. The Brave browser does all of that inherently. So that skips a lot of steps if you're you're trying to avoid, at least on a browser, everything in the first place.
All right, you want to actually come up to the mic? I should probably. Yeah.
So if you were having users, let's say creating accounts or something, say you're a small gaming company and you want to stay in touch with users or you want them to have some sort of account. If you misstep somewhere, what is typically, like, what realistically can happen?
Sure. So I don't know if I got picked up, but the question was like, what are the consequences of messing up when it comes to privacy? Like collecting data. So there are a couple different ways it plays out. The most common in the games industry enforcement is in the kid space. So if you're collecting, if you have a game that's likely to appeal to users over 15, how many people here are familiar with MAGWest? Actually, okay. So it's children's online privacy protection. And if you are, there's a great Silicon Valley application. The point is, if you are collecting information from underage users without parental consent, you can get in trouble. There's actually some pretty significant fines. One of the big ones was against Epic Games for Fortnite a couple years ago, which was $500 million, which is the largest fine for, I think, any privacy violation. At least kids. Yeah. So that was a big one. But more recently, there was this little social media network called NGL Labs, and they were running like a kind of sort of anonymous confession board type style app for kids and teens. And without getting into all the juicy stuff they did wrong, which was really fun, the consequence to your question was they were straight up driven out of business. They say you cannot offer your app to anyone under 18, which is a teen-oriented app. So they basically shut them down, and also $5 million. So there are real consequences. Again, look up the NGL Labs case. It was a very egregious set of errors. It was not just like a one-off, oops, we forgot to turn on, but there have definitely been a lot of enforcements in the game space, particularly around kids' privacy and the ad tech as well. The other big one was Tilting Point Media. They had a SpongeBob game, and it was collecting, and sharing information with third-party ad tech. Obviously, SpongeBob is a property that appeals to kids, so not getting parental consent is an issue for them.
So in terms of looking out for the fact that you don't know what you don't know, is having a lawyer on retainer and like something like that typically what even a small company might do?
Yeah, I mean,
At a certain point.
yeah, once you get big enough that you think you're going to have people and a significant number of people and a significant number of revenue, I mean, you would take this with a grain of salt, but yeah, it's good to talk to a lawyer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And anything else?
I work with a lot of startup game studios and small companies, and the sooner you can get legal involved, the better. And it's obvious, like Joe mentioned, we have we're interested in saying, hire us to do this work. But I make a lot more money fixing things after the fact than setting up properly the first time. So just like getting it right, it says it's hard to save a lot of time and headache and money. So.
Sorry, you were breaking up for a little bit. But yeah, Sam, in your experience, like at what point in a game's development is the best time to kind of work with a lawyer?
Pretty much as soon as you start involving other people, honestly. If that means, a small team of 2 or 3 people, get that LLC set up and make sure all your agreements are in place, everyone knows what everyone's doing. If you're working on a solo project, as soon as you're bringing on team members or going public with it, trying to get good press or Kickstarter or looking for publishers or anything, as soon as other people are involved, really, you want to make sure some of the legal stuff is buttoned up properly. In my experience, there's not a lot that needs to go on. It's not gonna be, everyone has their own budgets and financial limitations, but it's not going to cost all that much money, really, to get the LLC set up, trademark search done, maybe some kind of contractor agreement or partnership agreement among the various co-owners, core team. That's been pretty much it to get things going. And then as you go on, there might be more agreements, a publisher agreement to be reviewed, copyright filings as soon as you launch. If you get big enough to actually need employees, then employment law, compliance, and that sort of thing. But yeah, unfortunately, most of my clients have had a lot of constant legal needs. Good for them, I guess. So it's really not going to be, depending on what you're doing, but there's not going to be a whole lot of constant legal expenses, and making sure you get things done right at the ground level is going to help ensure that there aren't constant legal expenses.
I threw you that question because I think a lot of what we talk about in these panels is like the consumer-facing part of legal advice, because a lot of us do a lot of product counseling and consumer stuff. But the internal, you're running a company, you want to make sure that your relationship with your other, people who are creating stuff, there's a lot of internal contracting, licensing, publisher agreements, distribution agreements. I know, Riley, you spent a lot of time working on that. What are kind of the biggest, most high-impact contracts that you kind of deal with on a daily basis?
It really depends on what the business of that specific company is. If it's a company that is either using another company's IP to make their game, then those license agreements, depending on the size of the game, could actually be incredibly high value. Similarly, if you are that big company and you're licensing out some of your IP to maybe be like an in-game skin in another game, then those can also be pretty high impact depending on the amount of sales you expect. For instance, I'm just assuming if Ubisoft licensed something to Epic to go into Fortnite, just the sheer scale of Fortnite and the number of sales that they probably make of those skins is probably quite high, so that contract should be high value. But even just high impact from a non-monetary standpoint, I do think things that tend to directly involve the fans can get tricky, because you then start running into PR issues of you don't want to have this incredibly legalese contract or something like esports event. You want it to be fan friendly, but also protect the company's rights. Same thing with community guidelines for, say, Twitch streaming. So it's kind of striking that balance between lawyers being like, oh, I gotta protect everything, and making sure your PR team doesn't hate you. No one's gonna want to go to this. You took out all the fun. So
They're always going to hate us.
All right, good way to let's take a question.
That's a good segue to Twitch. Thoughts on video game live streaming and in-game comms?
In-game communications and okay. So the question is, So both Twitch streaming, broadcasting gameplay as well as in-game communications. So there's a lot of kind of ways to tackle that topic. We can talk about who owns the streaming and who has the streaming rights. We can also talk about, if we're talking about user-generated content and communication, there's a lot of work that goes into the trust and safety side of things. But can you, what aspect of it are you most interested in? Okay, so people are talking the game in your live stream. So I guess there's slightly. Let's talk about if you were running the game, and what do you do when people? All right. So it's a tricky question, because if you're just streaming the game, you don't have any liability for what other people say. We can talk a little bit about this.
The platform side, it's not the user.
No, you're not the publisher.
Yeah.
Sorry, you've actually given us a good stumper. An expectation of privacy, so when you are streaming, having other people, their conversations appear on the stream. Got it, yeah. That's a great question, because they're actually wiretap laws.
I was going to say, actually,
all right, Sam, hop in, yeah. I know you're
deal with one that was recently, and the answer is probably I don't know. But as you were talking about this, Joe, it occurred to me, is if you're recording, you're on a stream, and someone comes along and is chatting in game or whatever, and it gets picked up on your stream, well, you certainly didn't get consent from that person to record that and broadcast it to everybody. Now, some states are one-party consent as long as you're okay with recording, that's fine. Some states like Illinois are two-party consent states, where both parties have to be okay with the recording. And that brings in a whole lot of other issues, like what state law even applies. If I'm in Illinois and you're in Missouri, because that's a one-party state, and you're streaming and I say something to you in live chat that I didn't really want that to get out to the whole world, we're both playing, I don't know, Dark Souls, and I type something in chat and boom, there it is in front of 5,000 people on the internet. What happens next? And the answer is, I'm not entirely sure. It's a legitimate concern to be sure, but it's going to be really complicated.
So one of the things that a lot of game developers who are operating in these sorts of in-game communications. So this actually ties back to the Epic enforcement. Because one of the main things that the FTC, who brought the enforcement, was concerned about was the fact that when you started a game of Fortnite, voice chat was on by default. And you had to go into settings, essentially, to turn it off. So people would hop into the games and they'd immediately get shouted at. In some situations that's like okay, maybe they were saying like, oh, let me show you the ropes. But obviously there were kids who were getting harassed and there were teenagers as well as kids who were, being jerks. So one of the things that was part of that settlement was that, for teenagers, 13 to 18-year-olds in the US, voice chat and other sort of communication features like that, they could be on, but they had to be off by default. So you had to go into the settings and turn them on. And that is actually a trend that we are seeing more and more. Because actually, and this is one of my favorite little policy things, when you build a feature like that, the ability to toggle on and off chat for privacy reasons, or for kid protection reasons, frankly, everybody kind of likes it, Like, I think everybody appreciates the ability to turn on voice chat occasionally, or, to be asked before they get shouted at. It's in accessibility land, we call it the curb cut effect. You build something for a particular minority group, but it benefits everybody. So that is a thing that I'm actually quite optimistic about the industry, that those sorts of controls are going to become more commonplace, so that the exact situation you're talking about people's conversations getting picked up or recorded or streamed, those sorts of things, you at least aren't surprised when something like that happens. So, yeah, you want to come up to the mic? We've got 10 minutes left, so we can either talk about Palworld and Matches, or we can take some questions. Yeah, we can go a little. Yeah, go.
Since we have a lot of IP lawyers out here, I wanted to question, I've occasionally interacted with, I would call them moral rights provisions in various contracts. And quite frankly, I don't know if that's something we do very often in this country. And I usually look at them and I'm like, Lisa Simpson face, like, the hell is this? So I was wondering if those are actually like something I need to actually read, or is that really kind of boilerplate for companies that operate internationally?
Gotcha. Sam, the question was about moral rights.
Yeah, we don't do that here. I'm only joking a little bit. I can talk about that if you want. I'm first enough about it.
Go for it, Sam.
Go for it, Sam.
Okay, sure. So moral rights are like rights of the author, sometimes called. Basically, integrity of the work. If you have signed your name onto, for example, a painting, you've made that, and your name is on it, and you have the right to be identified as the person who painted that painting. And if someone comes along and messes with it, they've infringed on those rights. They've ruined your work. Now it looks like you're not as good an artist as you were, or you drew something else and maybe it's offensive, or whatever it is. But the integrity of the work that you created is what the moral rights cover. And like I said, we don't really do that here. There is a law that Congress passed to cover visual arts like sculptures and paintings and stuff, as long as they are in very limited quantities. So mass-produced drawings, paintings, a whole lot of print, not covered. I think it's 50 copies or under is all you're allowed. And then you do have moral rights along those lines. Otherwise, no. We don't do that here. So it's always something I put in my contracts just in case, but it doesn't exist here. If you're dealing with people in other countries, it might be more of a thing to be concerned about, and then you'd want to get counsel in that country to help you navigate how all that works. But for Americans dealing with Americans, unless it's a very small run painting, print, or a sculpture or something, you don't do that.
Yeah, I recall moral rights being much more of an issue like in Europe, like France especially is a place where moral rights come up quite a lot. But in the US, like Sam was saying, not nearly as much.
Shall we pivot? Let's use some minutes to talk about and patents and trademarks. Have at it.
I think as an initial disclaimer, we got to say that the Power World case is in Japanese court, and none of us are Japanese lawyers. So take what we say with a grain of salt. We're still figuring it out too. But we know that it's a patent infringement case. I think there was a lot of speculation that there was going to be a lawsuit at some point, but we were just kind of waiting to see when it was going to happen and what exactly was going to be claimed. My bet was on copyright infringement. I lost that bet.
Everyone lost that bet.
Everyone lost that bet. But, and I think, I don't know, I haven't read like a translated version of the complaint yet, but I know that, again, patent infringement, don't know what that patent is though. I don't know if Sam or Riley, if you have any insight to that yet?
There's a very long patent that everyone assumes is the patent in question, and it's so long because it's been continued multiple times, which means they basically did one disclosure and then they keep adding on to expand the claims in the patent. And what really matters in a patent are the claims that are laid out for what you're claiming as your invention that is non-obvious to someone having ordinary skill in the art. And what's interesting that they've added so many claims on is the more claims you add to a patent, the more open you make it to being challenged. So once a patent is issued, that's not the end-all be-all. You can actually challenge that patent and say, no, there's actually something in the prior art, meaning something already existed that is covered by those claims, so therefore that bit is invalid. So by having so many claims in the patent that people seem to think it is, they're just really leaving open this whole realm of potential prior art in other games or other forms of media that might be covered. So Power World may be able to challenge it on that, but there's also the point where because it's been added onto so many times, Nintendo might have been thinking about, hey, we might need to sue Power World at some point. So as we're adding these things on to the patent, let's craft it in such a way that we can specifically attack Power World on it. So they might have had that in mind while drafting it in the first place. But it's still a risky thing for Nintendo because they're putting their own patent at risk to a certain degree. So I think all of us are confused, like why is Nintendo going the patent route instead of the copyright route? And it's also risky for Power World to continue this because even if they win the first time, there's still more claims that Nintendo could add on and then still come after them again down the road. So it could be like no end in sight for Power World if it actually continues.
It could be more attrition here. So.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if we should maybe take a step back and define. Does everyone kind of understand the difference between a copyright and a patent? Okay, people like that. No? All right, anyone want to real quick explain just high level?
Very high level. Copyright is protection for a creative expression, so like a novel or a movie or a song, whereas patents are applied to sort of mechanical, functional things, like a formula or a machine, something like that.
one of the key distinctions about copyright is that it doesn't have to be new or novel in the same way that a patent is, as long as it's something that you came up with independently. So I think maybe one of the things that is trickier about a patent is you really have to be the first person to have come up with an idea, whereas to get a copyright, you really it has to be an original work of expression. It's a lower bar to get it. I'll make my own just quarterbacking speculation that I think Nintendo might have been a little bit worried about losing a copyright case to Palworld because of how many fan works and other sorts of Pokemon with blank things are out there. And patent is a little bit scarier and more esoteric. So that's my speculation, but I'm not a little cool.
I was actually interviewed by IGN on the copyright stuff back earlier in the year, and looking over a lot of the things people say, oh, this is the exact same thing. A lot of the similarities weren't really all that similar, other than sort of the high-level concept of like, this has a fire-breathing dragon. This one does too. Well, that doesn't really matter. It has to be copying something more than just sort of the abstract idea. We call it the concrete expression of it. Does your dragon look like Charizard? Is it described using the Pokédex entries about Charizard? If not, then you're probably fine.
That's Jonathan's favorite topic. You just the idea expression economy.
Oh, it's fun stuff. Another very high-level thing about copyright is that copyright only applies to the expression of an idea. It does not protect the idea itself. So, for example, the idea of a fire-breathing dragon that you can capture and train, that's an idea that's not protectable. Charizard is a very specific expression of that idea, though, and so is protectable. And this applies to a lot of different elements of copyright. But yeah, again, ideas are not protectable under copyright, whereas the expression of that idea is. It's also why you see a lot of games that they play kind of similarly, and sometimes no one owns the idea of Tetris or Match 3 or something like that, which is why you see a lot of Match 3 games out there. But the way that Match 3 game is going to be created and shown and displayed, that is where the protection of copyright comes into play. Someone might. No, Tetris. I was thinking tic-tac-toe. Sorry.
Oh, tic-tac-toe. Yeah,
Another T game.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Tetris is very specific.
I don't want you to get in trouble.
Yeah. Sorry, no. Tic-tac-toe, not Tetris.
They're very interchangeable there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes left. I know we can go a little over because we started late. Burning questions. Going once, going twice. What is the legal issue that gives you the most heartburn? We'll start with Riley.
Privacy, because it's an ever-evolving field from the state level to the country level, and if your company operates on a worldwide basis, you have a lot of laws to comply with.
Currently, I think the thing that's continues to give me pause are the two big burning questions under artificial intelligence right now, which is that of ownership and infringement. And where those two things are going to fall, because I don't know yet.
Holy shit, we got through an entire legal panel without anyone saying AI.
I had to get it in.
It's incredible. Now everybody's going to have questions.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. All right, Sam, go ahead.
So mine is actually very different, very much more specific, concrete thing. Pretty much every company, with a few exceptions, in the country now has to file a bunch of reports with the federal government as to who owns the company and who controls the company and where they're located and sleep at night. And first of all, getting people to understand they have to do this, and second of all, divulging all that information to a database I'm sure will never be misused for any reason or hacked, anything like that. Don't worry, everybody. It'll be fine. And also the fact it's been challenged in court and held unconstitutional by at least one trial court, but not widely applied. What the heck we're doing with this? All the beneficial ownership stuff? I don't know. We've got to get that figured out in the next 3 months for a lot of my clients. So that's what I'm concerned about right now.
Makes sense. Mine's pretty similar to Riley's. So I do a lot of work with kids. I know we didn't talk about it much. Actually, I'm curious, how many people here have kids who game or have kids here? Yeah, I'm the only one. I'm here. Cool. No, Sam's got it. But no, I think for me, I don't know if any of y'all are following COSPA or COPPA 2.0. There's a lot of legislative proposals right now to change how the internet's going to work for kids in the U.S. And there's a lot of laws out there. A lot of them are written in ways that make me a little uncomfortable personally, because they say things like, "You shall not use data in any way that will cause emotional harm to a child."
What does that mean?
It sounds pretty vague, right? And,
What? A fake law?
yeah, and you know, and we've seen, again, I'm preaching to the right crowd here, but we've seen like, you know, AGs in red states saying that they plan to use those laws in order to like limit access to LGBTQ resources or access to birth control. That keeps me up at night because I don't like that. But yeah, the good news is that we have a Supreme Court argument and these laws are getting challenged, and there's lots and lots of interesting developments in the U.S. as we grapple with these issues. But that is something that if you all want to talk about us, talk about with us, talk to us out in the panel. Anyway, last call for questions. I know we were a little over time. I know that some people had stuff. You have a question? Okay. Got it. So the question was digital ownership and skins. So like, yeah, I know you were trying not to say blockchain, but like, but yeah, ownership of digital items. Anyone want to take it? No one wants to take it.
I'm good.
No, it's cool. It's fine. All right. Well, thank you, anyway. After the panel. I want to thank again my panelists. Sam, thanks for your patience with the AV.
Happy to be here.
Yep. John and Riley, everybody give a round of applause for them. Thank you guys so much for coming with us. And we will be around to talk more. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.